The Damned. Released in the United Kingdom in 1963 under the title These Are the Damned, Joseph Losey's unnerving sci-fi thriller flew under the radar, overshadowed by more conventional Cold War narratives of its time. Produced by Hammer Film Productions in collaboration with Columbia Pictures, the film fused dystopian paranoia with social commentary that was unusually bleak for the studio best known for gothic horror. Based on H.L. Lawrence's novel The Children of Light, the plot centers on a government bunker housing radioactive children, engineered survivors of a nuclear apocalypse. It wasn't pure fantasy. The film echoed real-world anxieties in the wake of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and some critics now interpret it as a dark allegory for Cold War-era state secrecy. American director Joseph Losey, who had relocated to Britain after being blacklisted during the McCarthy era, laced the film with themes of surveillance, control, and institutional power. Oliver Reed, then in his mid-20s, played King, a volatile gang leader whose violent bravado collides with the film's deeper moral questions. His performance was intense, but the film's jarring tonal shifts, from seaside romance to existential dread, left early audiences and critics divided. As film historian Tony Williams later observed, the film was too hybrid, too political, and too grim for its time. Though it opened in the UK in 1963, the film didn't reach American audiences until 1965. Many suspect that its delay stemmed from unease over its political implications, particularly its depiction of a government willing to sacrifice humanity for survival. Legends hint that studio executives were unsure how to market a film that straddled science fiction, horror, and social critique. Today, The Damned is often cited as a prophetic cult entry, its influence showing up in later dystopian works from Children of Men to Stranger Things. Whether coincidence or foresight, its once-dismissed premise now feels eerily relevant. The Steel Helmet. In 1951, while Hollywood leaned into patriotic war dramas, one film broke ranks. The Steel Helmet, directed by Samuel Fuller, was the first American movie about the Korean War, and it didn't hold back. Filmed in just 7 days on a shoestring budget of around $100,000, it traded glossy heroism for grit. Fuller, a World War II veteran, drew from his own combat experience to craft a blunt, unsentimental look at war. The story follows a battle-hardened sergeant and a mismatched group of soldiers, forced to confront not only enemy fire but their own prejudices. One scene where a black medic challenges a comrade's racist assumptions ignited enough furor that the Pentagon reportedly took notice. Fuller was later questioned by the FBI, sparking debate over the film's unflinching take on military conduct. Some theorize that this uproar may have boosted the film's surprising commercial success. It grossed around $2 million, a massive return on its tiny budget. Despite its influence on later anti-war classics, The Steel Helmet remains overshadowed by more polished Golden Age titles. But for those digging beyond the usual canon, it's a raw, fearless outlier that dared to ask uncomfortable questions and didn't wait for permission. The Mortal Storm. In 1940, MGM released The Mortal Storm, a bold, politically charged drama that took direct aim at Nazi ideology, years before Hollywood made that a norm. Starring Margaret Sullivan and James Stewart, the film told the story of a German family torn apart by the rise of fascism. It was one of the first major studio films to openly criticize Hitler's regime, a move that risked MGM's access to lucrative European markets. The backlash was swift. Germany and Italy banned all MGM films. According to film scholar Thomas Doherty, the studio knowingly gambled millions in overseas revenue. Some academics propose that this global fallout may have influenced MGM's decision to gradually scale back the film's exposure in the post-war years, despite strong reviews and standout performances. Rumor has it that the film was effectively shelved, rarely screened, and left to gather dust in the vaults. Today it's seen as a trailblazer, an early cinematic warning against authoritarianism that arrived before America had even entered the war. The Prowler. Released in 1951, The Prowler is a noir thriller that slid past the mainstream radar, only to resurface decades later with a reputation far sharper than its original reception suggested. Directed by Joseph Losey and produced by Sam Spiegel under the alias S.P. Eagle, the film stars Van Heflin as a corrupt police officer whose obsession with a lonely housewife, played by Evelyn Keyes, spirals into a web of manipulation and violence. Screenwriting credit officially went to Hugo Butler, but blacklisted writer Dalton Trumbo is widely believed to have contributed behind the scenes, adding a layer of political intrigue to this work's already subversive tone, at a time when the production code still dictated what could and couldn't be shown. The Prowler challenged conventions with its themes of abuse of power and moral decay. Though it wasn't pulled from shelves, its limited distribution through United Artists kept it in the shadows for years. Numerous film historians suggest that the movie's unsettling critique of authority and masculinity, paired with Trumbo's rumored involvement, made studios hesitant to champion it. While not completely forgotten, it wasn't until a restoration in the 1990s that the picture began attracting serious critical attention. Noir expert Eddie Muller has reportedly praised it as a scathing look at post-war American disillusionment, and some cinephiles argue it laid early groundwork for the morally complex anti-heroes of neo-noirs like Chinatown and LA Confidential. Whether or not those later directors took notes, The Prowler remains a buried relic of Golden Age Hollywood, one that still stings when unearthed. The Outrage. In 1964, MGM released a western that defied expectations and quickly faded from view. The Outrage, a remake of Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, cast Paul Newman as a Mexican bandit, an eyebrow-raising decision even at the time. Rumors swirled about behind-the-scenes tension over the casting, with some insiders suggesting that studio executives had pushed for a bankable star despite the cultural mismatch. Director Martin Ritt, known for his socially conscious films, reportedly defended the choice by framing the story as a meditation on truth rather than identity. Still, the optics were hard to ignore. Newman's performance, delivered in bronzing makeup and a heavy accent, was met with discomfort by critics, and the film's box office performance reflected that ambivalence. Structurally, The Outrage broke with genre norms. Instead of the typical frontier morality tale, it unraveled a single crime from 4 conflicting angles, echoing Kurosawa's fragmented storytelling. This narrative experiment stood in stark contrast to the clear-cut heroism of most mid-century westerns. A handful of film historians now contend the movie was ahead of its time, a proto-revisionist western that anticipated the moral ambiguity of later classics. Others point to its technical ambition. Subtle shifts in lighting and framing were used to distinguish each character's version of events, a technique rarely attempted in genre films of the era. Though it flopped at release, The Outrage has resurfaced in recent years. A Warner Archive Blu-ray reissue in 2023 drew renewed attention, with modern critics revisiting its philosophical themes and flawed daring. One retrospective screening at the American Cinematheque even sparked debate over whether the film deserved cult status. Some dare to guess that, had it been released a decade later, it might have found its audience. Instead, it remains a curious footnote in the Western canon, one that stumbled hard but swung for something far more complex than its contemporaries dared to attempt. The Red House. In 1947, a modestly budgeted thriller called The Red House crept into theaters, softly, but with staying power. Directed by Delmer Daves and starring Edward G. Robinson, the film puzzled critics with its eerie blend of noir, psychological suspense, and rural melodrama. Robinson plays a reclusive farmer harboring a disturbing secret connected to an abandoned red house deep in the woods. Despite being distributed by United Artists, it never reached the acclaim of its studio-backed contemporaries. Still, it has since gained a cult following for its atmospheric tension and thematic boldness. Many critics note that Miklos Rozsa's haunting score, layered with dissonance and melancholy, elevates the film's unsettling tone. According to certain movie scholars, the film's independent production status may have allowed it to explore taboo subjects like obsession, guilt, and memory without major studio constraints. Folklore suggests the Red House was inspired by a real, long-abandoned farmhouse near the California set, adding a layer of local mythos to its aura. What makes the Red House stand out is how it places psychological unraveling in the heart of rural Americana, not in an asylum or urban underworld, years before such narratives became commonplace. Carnival of Sinners. Released in 1943, Maurice Tourneur's Carnival of Sinners landed in theaters during one of France's darkest chapters. The film centers on a desperate painter who acquires a mysterious severed hand that promises artistic greatness, but at a steep moral cost. While the premise echoes Faustian themes, Tourneur's approach leaned into psychological horror layered with philosophical undertones. Shot in haunting black and white, The film's eerie atmosphere and symbolic visuals hinted at deeper anxieties of the time. Some film scholars suggest its metaphysical framing allowed it to bypass wartime censors, veiling critiques of personal compromise and societal control. Stories claim that the film's long-standing obscurity wasn't just due to limited wartime distribution, but also unease with its unsettling reflections on guilt and ambition. Though Maurice's son, Jacques Tourneur, would go on to fame in Hollywood with films like Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie, this French production forged its own legacy. Today, Carnival of Sinners is recognized as a bold and underseen gem of Golden Age horror, one that dared to ask troubling questions beneath its supernatural surface. Night Tide. Night Tide, released in 1961, remains one of the most subtly daring horror films of its era. While most genre entries leaned into monsters or spectacle, this moody indie production, starring a young Dennis Hopper, chose ambiguity over gore. Directed by Curtis Harrington, the film follows a sailor who becomes entangled with a woman performing as a sideshow mermaid, only to suspect she may be something far stranger. Its minimalist style and eerie tone invited comparisons to Val Lewton's shadowy horror classics of the 1940s, though it never reached their level of recognition. Speculation abounds that Harrington's earlier collaborations with avant-garde filmmaker Kenneth Anger helped shape the film's surreal, dreamlike pacing and cryptic symbolism. Shot around Venice Beach on a modest budget, Night Tide was part of a growing wave of independent horror that emerged as the studio system weakened in the late 50s. Though largely overlooked at the time, the film has since been restored and re-evaluated, with contemporary commentators praising its haunting restraint and poetic visuals. It may not have the cult cachet of Carnival of Souls, but Night Tide's unnerving strangeness has earned it a place among the Golden Age's most underappreciated cinematic curiosities. The Earrings of Madame De. Released in 1953, the film, directed by Max Ophuls, is a masterwork of visual storytelling that subtly slipped past many American viewers during its time. While critics in Europe hailed it as a pinnacle of cinematic elegance, it never gained the same traction in the US, eclipsed by the era's dominant Hollywood musicals and melodramas. Some cinema experts suggest that American distributors saw it as too European, a label often applied to films that favored emotional nuance over fast-paced plotting. Set during the Belle Epoque period, roughly around the turn of the 20th century, the film follows a pair of diamond earrings as they circulate through the lives of the French aristocracy, exposing the fragility behind their polished facades. Danielle Darrieux delivers a haunting performance as Madame Louise, a woman trapped in a gilded cage of social conventions. Scholars like Susan White have noted how Danielle's portrayal captures the contradictions of femininity in post-war European cinema, graceful yet subtly rebellious. Max's direction is frequently cited for its technical brilliance. His signature tracking shots transform scenes into choreographed sequences of emotion and movement. The ballroom scene, often referenced in film theory circles, glides through chandeliers and dancers in a single fluid shot that mirrors the characters' unraveling relationships. It's the kind of sequence that film professors love to dissect, not just for its beauty, but for how it marries form and feeling. Though it never became a household name in the US, the film has earned a loyal following among directors. Martin Scorsese has praised its dreamlike quality, calling Max Ophuls' camera work a dance. Stanley Kubrick is rumored to have admired its precision so much that he considered it a model of cinematic perfection. Irrespective of whether those anecdotes hold water, they've only added to the film's mystique. In recent years, a high-definition restoration by the Criterion Collection has helped revive interest, complete with archival materials and expert commentary. For those exploring Golden Age gems that flew under the radar, The Earrings of Madame De remains a subtly devastating triumph, one that continues to influence filmmakers decades after its release. The Secret Beyond the Door. Released in 1947, The Secret Beyond the Door marked Fritz Lang's audacious blend of gothic melodrama and film noir, genres not typically known for plumbing the depths of the human psyche. Joan Bennett stars as a bride who marries in haste, and soon discovers her new husband is hiding more than just a mysterious past. At the center of the plot, a locked room she's forbidden to enter. The feature perplexed contemporary critics. Certain viewers praised its dreamlike visuals and ominous tone, while others wrote it off as disjointed. Cinematographer Stanley Cortez who would later shoot The Night of the Hunter, infused this production with shadow-drenched expressionism that echoed Lang's silent-era roots in Weimar cinema. Parallels to Hitchcock's Rebecca are unmistakable, but Lang probes even deeper into the subconscious, examining repression and trauma with a daring approach that most mainstream films of the decade avoided. While Freudian themes were already percolating in the 40s, this movie brought them boldly to the forefront, long before it became trendy in Hollywood. Rumors hold that creative clashes between Lang and Universal's executives may have contributed to its uneven tone. Initially dismissed as a misfire, it floundered at the box office and soon drifted from public awareness. Yet decades later, film scholars began to reevaluate it as a daring psychological experiment, one that may have arrived too early for its own good. Restored prints now circulate on platforms like the Criterion Channel, offering modern audiences a fresh look at a noir oddity that cracked open the genre's darker, more cerebral possibilities. The Reckless Moment. In a year dominated by explosive noir like White Heat and Criss Cross, Max Ophuls' The Reckless Moment inconspicuously fell by the wayside. Released in 1949, the film stars Joan Bennett as Lucia Harper, a middle-class mother entangled in a blackmail scheme that threatens her family's reputation. But unlike its louder contemporaries, this one whispers its danger. Known for his elegant tracking shots, Max Ophuls transforms ordinary domestic spaces into claustrophobic traps. Film historian Dana Poland once observed that Max Ophuls uses movement to express entrapment, a technique on full display here, as the camera glides with unnerving grace. Contemporary critics wrote it off as just another melodrama, but some contemporary scholars, including Laura Mulvey and B. Ruby Rich, have since reevaluated it as a proto-feminist noir. Lucia isn't just a mother in crisis. She's a woman navigating a system that leaves her little room to act, except in secrecy. Whispers have circulated that Ophuls subtly pushed back against the post-war gender norms Hollywood was reinforcing at the time. The film's reputation began to shift decades later, especially after the 2001 remake The Deep End, starring Tilda Swinton. That version sparked renewed interest in Ophuls' original, which now enjoys a modest cult following among noir aficionados. It may not have the gunfire or grit of its peers, but its slow-burn tension and moral ambiguity make it a standout for those willing to look past the obvious hits. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.